How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm hot. It's warm here.
Oh,
Which,
are you guys? Is it like a? How long have you had a heat wave going on
to
for?
be fair, I just checked. Apparently, it's 16 degrees. So no, it's not
Oh, it's
actually
not
hot.
so bad.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm just melting. Yeah, we've had a bit of a heat wave. But just the UK is sort of not designed for it. So
This is a thing that like I didn't know until I lived in your country for a while, your country in particular.
yeah,
Um,
I
because there'd be times in the news it'd be like, oh, British heat wave, and we would see the temperatures and be like, what are you even talking about? But two
mm,
things a lot of people don't realize: a, air conditioning is not a universal feature of a lot of
it's like
British
reasonably rare.
homes. Yeah, and two, much more humid country than I think most people realize. It is one of the most
Mm,
damp places I have lived in my entire life. I
yeah,
guess it
yeah,
depends on
yeah.
the part, but it's just like it's a very sticky country you got yourself.
Well, I think we've got a lot of coast as well, so that sort of
A
makes
ton of it.
everything a bit humid and like,
Yeah.
I don't know, sea air coming in. But
So you're allowed to complain about that. But I'm gonna start asking you some questions.
how's the
Well,
stream going
obviously,
first? How's it? What have I jumped into? What
oh,
have I
you were
ruined by
discussed
suddenly
before. Okay.
arriving?
So I need to let you know this is a legal thing, so you don't get in trouble. Earlier in
Okay.
the show, notable YouTuber FD Signifier was in the chat, and he asked me as a bit if I was ever going to get on Nebula, who would I kick off to make a spot for myself? So I did look through the entire roster of Nebula on stream, and
And it was
I
this guy.
did decide I would kick off Johnny Harris if I had to kick someone off. Now, yeah, this is your colleague at Nebula. You shouldn't say anything because you would never make a video about a Nebula colleague and say anything critical about their work or who funds it. But my logic was he's fine. He's doing great. He has his own little empire. I don't
Dinner
think he needs that.
sorted. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you were critiqued as FD was critiqued as people who have multiple pages on Nebula. When you scroll through, we're getting 4 separate Tom Nicholas properties.
Too many like side projects.
Well, I'm just like if I'm looking for your stuff, let's have it all under one place.
All under one roof.
Yeah, but so just so you know, so if Nebula HQ reaches out and they say Michael Burns is on our no talk list, he did a horrible thing. I just need to let you know that I have full transparency. So you've missed that, which was a complete derailment of what I planned to do. But I think when FD tells you to do something dumb, you got to do it. And two, we talked about a much less fun thing, evangelical Christian Zionism in America, and looked into the weird history of why American evangelicals love the state of Israel and why they genuinely believe that if a war breaks out in the Middle East, Jesus is going to come back and take them to heaven.
For more than just like national security reasons.
Yeah. So there's a
Like the
theology
sort of
called
theology of it.
dispensationalism. Yeah. It's a full on theology. And they quite literally believe that if they can accelerate a holy war in the Middle East, it will bring Christ back in a left behind situation and that they will get to go to heaven.
But do they have to go to Israel first? Is that the
Well,
system?
check it out. The system is that like it's kind of like Christ is in his slumber and a holy war in the Holy Land will wake his alarm clock will go off. And that will be the thing that brings Christ back. So in a sense, like American evangelicals are one of the big political and financial supporters of the Israeli political project and stuff like that. But they're basically saying like, we support you because we want you guys to die in a war so that Jesus will get us.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, in the UK, the sort of tradition has been just to be like, well, isn't this kind of the New Jerusalem? Like, haven't we?
Yeah.
That seems far away. I don't want to go all that way. Like,
Yeah, and I respect that. So that just catches you up on any bit of context. And we talked a little bit. So this is it's a Nebula related thing that led into looking at the roster, which leads into some stuff I want to talk to you about, but it's also discussing a little bit because I think there was some, we're just really into your Nebula colleagues today. There's been a lot of discussion after Abigail Philosophy Tube's most recent video about the problem with video essays. Have you watched that one?
I have not. I have
All
not.
right.
Don't quiz me on it.
I
You can give
will
me.
no
You can give
no.
me the. You can give me
Well,
the.
I might be like a little wrong in my interpretation, but it seemed like a sort of creative response to criticism she got because of the two Nietzsche videos
Mhm,
that
mhm,
were just, and I say this with full respect, she makes better videos than I do, is a legend in the field. They were a little sloppy in the discussion of Nietzsche, and I think she kind of said at some point they were kind of largely based on like one source.
mm,
So leaned into a
mm,
very particular reading of Nietzsche. The most recent video does some like very fun stuff in setting up kind of like the problem with making educational content, in particular philosophical content on YouTube, and the issue of the host or the writer of that piece of content inevitably like inserting their own subjectivity in that process of transmission
mm,
from idea to audience. And I feel like there's been, this is something I want to talk to you about. We're kind of in this in the last few months, so many, and I think we've both participated in this genre, a lot of videos that are sort of the problem with video essays, YouTube's not going so well, why it's hard to be a
mm,
content creator, this sort of thing. And rather than a sort of financial critique of that, because in the video she acknowledges, she's doing quite well.
mm,
It was a sort of critique of the form itself.
mm, mm.
So, well, let me ask you this to throw you under the bus a bit, and you have not watched this video. Um,
What do I
I mean,
think?
as
Rate it
yeah,
out of
no,
five.
no,
You
but
know.
as someone who makes stuff, which
Mm,
to really not unfairly, but to reductively summarize your project, that uses your skills and background as someone who's done academic research to explore ideas in a way that I think teaches people about new concepts and helps them understand things better. What do you think like your responsibility is to like get it right? And I intentionally am using finger quotations when I say get it right, because I don't know if that should even be the point, but what do you think about that when you're making
yeah,
things?
because that kind of there's a lot of aspects of kind of getting it right. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought a lot about that thing, like you said, sort of like basing something upon one uh too heavily on one source, so you end up with this kind of like one angle thing, or sometimes you go,
Mm-hmm.
or what have I, because there's the flip side to kind of maybe what you're getting out of putting too much of yourself into something, where you're something about the presentation is implying that you're not putting a lot of yourself in it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
um the flip side of that is the video that is so heavily based on one thing that you kind of take the step back and go, did I kind of do a book review and really pretend that I did new knowledge?
Yes. And I will say, like, I can't think of an example right now, but I'm sure that I've done that. Like, I am
Yeah, I
sure.
totally have. So
Yeah.
I did. I think the one that I always look back on, like, as I did one that was very much kind of like Adorno and Co.'s kind of
Mhm.
uh, authoritarian personality. I sort of set it up like that. Like, I don't think I hid that, but sort of look back and I'm like, okay, that probably wasn't the most interesting version of that. There's like actually me doing some synthesis
Mhm.
is more interesting than me just doing the uh sort of book summary, which was one aspect of when I don't know, when there was the whole sort of plagiarism thing around when H Bomber Guy made the video a
Yeah.
couple of years ago. I can't remember how long ago that was now. There's this sort of like, how, to what extent is something plagiarism? Where does that begin and where does that end? And I remember
Yeah.
sitting with that idea of like, well, actually, if you want to make the film adaptation of a book, even if it's a factual book, and you want to make I don't know, there's like a Capital in the 21st Century, the film. There's like
Mhm.
there's loads of non-fiction books that end up. The Big Short is a book originally, right? Um, you officially you need the rights to do that.
Mhm.
And maybe you can do the book review. You can do and yeah. And I think I had a moment where at some point, this was like maybe a good couple of years ago now, where I was like, well, I kind of want to avoid doing that. Like, I don't know, like, that feels like, if I'm going to put time and effort into something, I want it to feel like I've done some additional even if it's
Yeah.
synthesis of a bunch of different stuff. I want to bring something new. But then I think if you're doing that, you want to be kind of open that that's what you're doing. Because as you say, there's this other world where you sort of imagine you're doing an introduction to dot dot dot, but you're bringing so much of yourself to it that you're, I don't know, I did a kind of manufacturing consent style video where I kind of, I don't know, to my mind that feels different because I sort of took the stuff and then applied it to a new thing. Maybe other people might disagree. They might be like, that was just a book report that you, I don't know, you're trying to oversell. But you know, to what extent do you get to a point where it's like, well, actually, this isn't that book. This is like Tom Nicholas's interpretation and like version of that book, which might be entirely valid, but which maybe is a bit on people to be
Yeah.
like,
Well, there's
just
like
go and read the
the
book.
word that, yeah. I mean, the word that comes to mind is almost like there's a form of soft plagiarism that I think can happen
Mm,
sometimes where someone reads a book, they get excited about the book, they make a video that maybe references the book, but can inadvertently present it as if like
mm,
I'm
mm.
explaining this cool thing to you. But what I'm kind of doing is summarizing arguments that someone else has made, but it looks cooler than that. And I don't want to say that I find that to be wholly abhorrent and unethical, but there's something that feels a little off about it.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I'm sort of there with you that kind of you want to, I don't
this
know,
is
if
someone.
you're sort of
We're in hell in the chat brings up the Epoch Philosophy, a channel that I like. Says he openly calls his videos adaptations of the philosophy books he's covering, which seems like a good solution, but feels weird to me. I mean, that's an interesting one because I think I get why that feels weird for a lot of academics, especially who are not really making money on their books. I do
mm,
wonder
mm,
if you, I don't know, like when I was in academia still, if someone have said, hey, I kind of made a video that's like about your book, I like reference your book in it, but I'm just like repeating the ideas, but it looks cool, I would probably be like, that's awesome, you kind of just made a commercial for my work for free.
yeah, it
So
sort
I
of
can
depends,
see
doesn't
that.
it? It sort of depends, like, but then, yeah, as you say, if they have written this book that actually they're not realistically, they're not getting paid anything to write an academic book. Possibly they've paid to write it and they've put a lot of additional time outside of their kind of contracted time for the university into it. Um, at the same time, they might be within their rights to be like, oh, um, I feel disgruntled about that.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, then I think there's like the flip side of that, and this kind of references the thing you were talking about before, where, you know, maybe people need to be a little bit more brazen or bold and just being like, this is what I think about a
mm,
thing,
mm,
and doing a form of analysis. And I understand why people don't want to do that because it feels A, nice to situate ourselves in historical and scholarly context, and B, those of us who aren't egomaniacs might think like, well, what gives me the right
yeah,
to be
yeah.
the person that's sort of just saying stuff?
And we sort of teach, like, because I feel like most people who are making this kind of stuff have either done some kind of university level qualification course where they've kind of learned how to do this, or they at least exist downstream from that because they've watched other people do the thing.
Yeah.
And like, and that we kind of teach people to do that, right? We kind of tell people to, um, not just start from scratch, to take something and adapt it and use it and to kind of go, this is this person's framework that they've developed. We kind of discourage people from feeling too much like they can create their
Yeah.
own um, framework for
Yeah.
analyzing the thing, whatever the thing is.
For sure. I mean, wait, side question. Did you ever teach when you were doing your
Yeah,
postgrad or
yeah, I
anything?
did a good
Yeah.
few years of
Yeah.
teaching.
Well, it's another thing where, and I'm probably wrong sometimes, but I feel like I can often tell in the, I don't know what we call it anymore, the educational YouTube space, the breadtube space, whatever it is. I think you can tell who has taught before and who has had the experience of trying to
Mm.
communicate big ideas to folks.
How? What's the tell?
One of the tells is that I feel like they are prioritizing the communication of ideas over prioritizing showing that they understand the ideas. To be a little bit more clear there,
Mm,
there's some forms of content I've seen where people do a good job of showing how they understand the big idea or exemplifying their ability to get it in a way that almost feels like it prioritizes the spectacle of knowledge over the
okay. Yeah.
communication of knowledge or ideas. Because I do think, I don't know if you ever had this experience, but like when I first started teaching, the biggest shock was realizing my job here is not to communicate all the stuff that I think that's really important at the highest level possible. My job is to figure out like how can I communicate the important ideas from whatever subject we're studying in a way that relates to these students so that my
Mm,
end
mm.
goal is them participating in the construction of some form of knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of meeting people where they are with the sort of thing they which I mean, I would say is probably to kind of get to on the like top level, one of the reasons why the kind of YouTube video essay form
Mhm.
often engaging with some form of pop culture, which I think has for a long time been like the go-to kind of thing. Um, I think one of the reasons why that works so well is that you're meeting people. If you're doing some sort of social theory thing and like how this explains, it's become more difficult in recent years because there's a lot, sort of much more of a um, dispersal of culture. But I don't know how the Mandalorian
Mhm.
explains masculinity or something like that. Like you're kind of meeting people where they are with like, oh, you've seen this thing, right?
Mhm.
You've got this shared reference point. Like, yes, I'm talking to you from the UK, and you're like all these people are watching from all over the place, but you've maybe all watched Disney Plus's Star Wars
Yeah.
colon The Mandalorian. It's not what it's called, is it? That's um
Oh,
but like
probably not. Yeah.
and so we've got this kind of shared field to sit in that then we can like spiral out on the ideas from that. Um yeah. I mean, I've always thought like the thing I that most disappoints me is when people say like um oh, I don't really like. I don't know when I've like bumped into people. It's like friends, friends of friends who are like, "Ah, had a look or looked a bit too like it go above my head," and I'm like, "No, I don't want that to happen." Like
Mhm.
I usually think that for most ideas, there is a way of communicating them to most people. Maybe that's like super, um, I don't know, utopian of me,
Yeah.
but like I usually think like there's some way of at least the core argument of some kind of like social theory or whatever it is, that there's some way of getting that across to most people. Um, but and I think one of the most difficult things about this work, I mean, any kind of like educational work, any kind of communicative work, is often finding the level on which most people can get in on it.
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
Like it's easy to like accidentally, you like I've done this where I've spent a month immersing myself in the thing, and you're accidentally assuming knowledge that people don't have, and then you're just like, I've kind of I wasn't starting on the same floor everyone else was, so therefore it just was boring, like, and no one could get into it.
I mean, that one's such a weird balance because it makes me think of this is wait, I can say this in front of you because you did some stuff in theater, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to say a theater kitty thing, and now
yeah.
I know you can't bully me, but there was an improvisational theater guru that I liked, who
Mm,
said to like treat the audience like scholars and poets or something like that. And there was
mm,
a phrase that gets used sometimes in certain forms of improvisational comedy, which is like play to the top of your intelligence. The idea
mm,
being that sometimes with comedy, folks think you have to dumb it down or treat people like little idiots, whereas you can actually make more compelling, improvisational theater or comedy when you treat people like they're smart. And I found that tension before because the thing sometimes, like when I was still working at Wisecrack, there's times where I definitely think things would get dumbed down a bit, because we were concerned about making them communicable or accessible. I have found that since making stuff under my own auspices, I get a little more in the weeds, I guess, but it doesn't seem like there is a negative reaction against that. And I almost think of it as like, as long as you're being engaging about it and allowing someone to at least kind of stay on board, then you can get somewhere with it. Like I was even thinking, I did a guitar lesson recently. I hadn't done one in years, and it was with this guy who's kind of like a jazz superstar. And the entire lesson, I felt like I was just hanging on. Like I always like just got what we were doing, but I actually found it really compelling because then at the end of it, I was like, okay, I was there just enough to get the main arc of what we worked on, and now I have stuff to work on in the future. Whereas if that entire lesson, everything, I would have been like, oh yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that. Then it would have been over and I would have been like, cool, I'm good. I know that now.
Yeah.
So I think there's like an interesting balance there in how we approach that stuff.
And I think there's a thing of like, as long as you start, like, I don't know, I've always been like, well, I want to start in a place that people can jump on board from.
Yeah.
Because, even if people already know the, I don't know, going back to sort of manufacturing consent, because that's on my mind, but like, even if someone already knows like the 5 filters of the propaganda model or whatever, doesn't hurt to be reminded of them briefly. But one thing I think I've always been really keen about is the fact that you can take that to place, like, or you can, as you say, sort of get into the weeds of it a bit, as long as you kind of lay the breadcrumbs, to overextend the metaphor. That's not weeds, is it? That's a woods. But
we'll mix it. It's fine.
You like, as long as you kind of draw the line for how to get there, usually that's all right. You don't have to just do the base level and then be like, oh well, you wouldn't all. There used to be a sort of like running gag in some videos where people would be like, so this person said this thing, and do a kind of like oh, like boring, and I was always like, oh, but that's all really and I'd just be like, oh no, I think that's
like
a real
that.
shame. Like, I don't like, and like, mate, I don't know, I don't think it's like, I don't think it was ever some sort of like big point anyone was trying to make, and I'm sure it's me being like a massive killjoy but sometimes sometimes I'd seen it done where I was like, actually, that book's quite an accessible book. Like and I feel like that's a shame to be like, no, let's not be curious about that thing. Let's not like kind of dig into that.
Well, so when you are putting something out, I have a couple specific questions about your work. What do you want the audience? Not what do you want them to do?
Yeah.
But what would your goal be? And obviously, we're imagining a perfect world here. We all know that a huge percentage of people that watch stuff on YouTube are like on their phone doing something else or start a video and forget about it. Like, it is what it is. But for those in your core audience who are tuning in, who are watching every video, what do you want the end result to be for them? What do you want their takeaways to be, either in what they think or how they kind of like respond?
I think it's sort of depends. Like, I think I'm happy with very little. I obviously would. I don't know. Like, if the take home is you have learned something about this topic, you've got a new way of thinking about this topic, that is kind of okay to me. I like, oftentimes, like, one thing I often get out of watching stuff or reading stuff is the sense of like, there is another person who kind of is reflecting on these ideas in a similar way. Certainly, I mean, this isn't something I've done for a lot of time, but certainly kind of like when it's sort of film criticism or kind of film analysis or that kind of thing. Like, the thing that I quite like about that stuff is, when I've been to watch film, watched a TV program, and really got something out of it, or maybe I've really disliked it, I don't know, like, and I want to think about it for longer or kind of spend longer with it, finding that someone has made a video essay or written a review or whatever, in which they kind of dig into it. Like, I love that, because it's kind of like, oh, great, I can spend longer with this piece by finding out what someone else has thought about it, and maybe it'll be similar things that I've thought about it. Maybe it'll be coming at it from a completely different angle, and sometimes it's that about like these days I'm sort of mostly making things about stuff that is happening in the world, and
Well,
this kind
this
of
is my next question for you is sort of when you look at your filmography, so to speak. There's been
mm,
a transition from talking about, ideas or text or things happening online to your work being a lot more, maybe this is the wrong way to put it, but like journalistic or sort of
yeah,
active in the world. You're leaving the house,
going
you're getting
outside.
out there.
It's
Yeah,
wild.
you exist in the world. So I mean, how has that shifted? Obviously, I'm sure there's like the nuts and bolts side of it allows you to be more creative, you get more involved with production, but how has that kind of shifted the stuff you're making and how you're thinking about the end game of it when you're involving it more directly with the work? Because you've done stuff on like, this is just like recent stuff, but like, climate activism, various aspects of the government in the country in which you live. Most recently, of course, Weatherspoons, which for people who don't know what that is, it's like if there was a McDonald's for pubs or something like that, a ubiquitous chain that
I
exists
think that's
everywhere
probably a good
from now
way
on.
of. I don't know if there's
Um,
are there any like chain bars in the US?
we don't, so we have like chain, I mean, you've been here obviously, but like more like chain restaurants, like you have like a
Mm,
Chili's or an Outback Steakhouse or a TGI Fridays. But because we don't have the pub culture, there's
mm,
not this. The closest when I was growing up, there was a chain of pubs called Bennigan's that were vaguely Irish themed.
okay, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
in my mind, that was as close as we had to a Weatherspoons. But of course, then Weatherspoons has the other phenomenon of like it's wildly cheap and
Yeah,
always
yeah, yeah,
seems
yeah.
weird. I've thought ever since that video came out, in the thumbnail, you're holding a pint glass of sorts. Is that the shape of glasses they use at Weatherspoons these days?
I think they have whatever the sort of
Okay.
company that has produced the beer. These days, it's been like this for a little while, I guess. Like
Huh.
most um, breweries, for each drink will have a specific shaped glass,
Yeah. It's
and then
because it's been about
some of them are
eight
really pushing
years
the
since I've been in a
boundaries
Weatherspoons. Yeah.
of glass technology.
Um,
Um,
but all to say is like doing something like that is very different than a video that's
mm,
sort of like, here's a thing that happened on the internet or here's a book. So how has that shifted your approach? And what
yeah,
even like led to you wanting to be out in the world like a
I
real
think
person?
I'd sort of done a bunch of stuff over the years where I was kind of doing, I don't know, talking about a particular institution or talking about
Mm.
something in the media and kind of how we talk about it, and sort of gradually shifted towards that kind of. And I think that possibly came out of a thing of going, um, having spent a lot of time talking about how the how does this particular film, how does this particular thing like talk about this thing in the real world, and having that thing of going like, actually, I think I just want to talk about the thing, which I think a lot of there's a lot of it about where kind of someone's sort of talking about how a film does the thing, and actually you kind of using that as jumping off point because you want to talk about the thing, um and then started doing a few pieces where I was like, oh, fuck it, let's go and like just film next to the thing. Like, let's go
Yeah.
um, and very much, I think when I was first starting doing this kind of stuff was just going, okay, well, I'll still just sort of write what is effectively a video essay, but I will just go and stand next to the relevant
Yeah.
building
You'll
or the
do some
relevant.
exterior
I'm like,
shots
hey,
while
look
you,
in
cause
there.
yeah.
Um, and gradually started kind of riffing on that a little bit more, and then got to a point where I sort of also wanted to bring in some kind of interview stuff because I was like, well, I'm quoting a lot of stuff throughout the stuff I'm making, or and yeah, sometimes I've got one or two things where I'm going, oh, this particular book has actually been really super helpful. Maybe I've read other things, but actually this feels like the one that really um has chimed with me as like the one that is tied all the things together in a similar way. Um, or I don't know, or maybe there's just someone who's got an interesting argument, and I think of just going like, oh, actually, I could chat, like I could email them and see if they'd be up for doing an interview, which then also becomes like a really interesting additional part of the process. We did a thing about housing policy in the UK,
Mhm.
and I read a bunch of stuff around it. So just kind of came to it with some knowledge, but and then I sort of approached sort of historian to do a little interview about it, to kind of place some bits in and kind of be like, oh, actually, wouldn't it just be fun to interview him and have him say the things himself rather than me go like, oh, this person said this thing. Um, and then as part of the research process, you're like, "Oh, this is actually really sick because I've read this guy's book." And then I'm like, "Hey, so remember this thing?" Like, "Oh, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, that is true. Okay, I have
Uh,
remembered that correctly." Or, "Oh, you didn't quite get to this. Oh, brilliant. Okay." And yeah, I think part of it is that thing of getting to a point where I'm like, "Well, maybe I don't have all the things to say. Like, maybe
mhm, mhm.
actually there is expertise that is really useful that could come in here that isn't me sort of reckoning some stuff." Um, and there's ways to do that that's really interesting. I did a piece about the House of Lords, where yeah, suddenly there was this opportunity to have people to interview people that are going to sort of push back on the way I might have presented the thing,
Mhm.
and then that's kind of interesting. Um, and obviously, how to frame that is a whole other question. But yeah, so I think there's like a creative aspect to it where it's like, oh, I think maybe I can, I don't know, maybe there's something, an interesting layer to add to this
Mhm.
here, but also, does it make for a richer piece as well in terms of the information that, um, that's being conveyed or explored or whatever it is?
Your most recent video, "This Isn't Working," all lowercase, is an entry in a genre we've seen more and more recently of
Mhm,
YouTube video essayists, some of whom I think people look at as like very successful or, like people that do really well, have big audiences, putting out videos that are sort of like, hey, in many ways, this is not working. And, like I was talking about
mhm,
this earlier on the show, but like, Broe D. Chanel, a really great video essayist, put out a video kind of like that. Sisyphus 55 put out a community post. Obviously, Innuendo Studios got a lot of attention for putting out a video about going bankrupt on YouTube. Uh, some people got mad at me because in my last video, I talked about a goal of getting to a certain number on Patreon so I could have a financially sustainable thing. And I've been kind of, and I want to talk about like that video and sort of where you're at with your channel, but I've been really surprised by how that genre and some of those videos have made people really mad. And
mm,
my algorithm sucks because YouTube will show me videos from very small channels where someone is saying that I'm stupid.
okay,
Like it wants to bother me. But there was like one thing I saw where I'm pretty sure the person was referencing your video, my video, and at least one other thing. And we're kind of doing this thing of just like all these big time video essayist just begging for money so they could live their fantastical lifestyles while they don't want to
mm,
work hard like the rest of us type thing. Now, we can talk about this more. I think that's a ridiculous argument that's born of A, not understanding economics, and B, a really sad type of resentment. But I will say, like, I was surprised at first when I saw that you had entered the genre of the YouTube isn't working video thing, just because you've done so much awesome stuff recently. You've made a documentary. Your production quality is top notch. So what kind of led to you having to join that genre?
I guess yeah, so we sort of been in a place for a few. I mean, like, so making videos is really expensive. Like, as you know,
Mhm.
maybe
Well, and
not everyone.
especially like the level at which you do stuff. I will say, I think people are probably surprised to know, and I'll talk about this later if people want. Well, like, even just making a standard video essay is not cheap. Like if you
Mm,
are
mm,
fairly paying an editor, if you have anyone working on graphics or anything like that, especially if you're doing any external stuff, the level of stuff you're doing is like you're making like like documentary style things. So I imagine that's super expensive.
mm. And I mean, and a lot of the, like, I would say, kind of a lot of the, like, going to a place and filming is sometimes expensive. It's
Mhm,
also the kind of thing that you can either decide to do or not do because you're like, "Oh, maybe let's rein it in for the next couple because
mhm.
the thing's not going as well. So, like, let's do some digital interviews rather than go to the place." Or,
Yeah.
um, actually, often the expensive stuff is just people's time to, um, edit stuff, or to kind of make stuff happen, or to go and be the people to do the filming, like which, and we've got like a tiny team. So it's me, a video editor, and then we've got I think his official job title is research and production assistant, who does
Oh,
like 2
nice.
days a week. So the sort of three whole humans, but kind of 2.2, I guess, in terms of like amount of time. And kind of just making stuff happen is expensive. And that's before you get into like, I don't know, that thing where you're like, oh, what if the camera breaks? Like, we have to be able to like buy a new camera, like, right? Like,
No.
we might not be like going out and being like, oh, let's buy a ridiculously super fancy camera and like let's get a new one because we just want this tiny little feature. But like, you do have to be prepared for the eventuality that like a thing breaks, or like I don't know, someone's computer dies, and therefore you've got to buy them a new computer, and that's like a whole thing. Someone's saying in the chat that AI editors will make it much easier for you guys. But so like there's like a lot of expense that's involved in kind of making stuff. Video also just has so many different steps of like, you kind of have to write the thing. Sometimes I'm like, what a dream world it would be to write a thing and that's like done. Like, imagine that, like, you finish it and you give it a redraft, and then you like just put it into the world and it's kind of done. But there's so many steps to it. You've kind of got to do research. If you're doing interviews, that's the whole thing of like, we've got to kind of coordinate people. And sometimes that's super smooth. Sometimes it takes a bit of just back and forth. And then you've got all the additional stuff of just the kind of like, got to attach receipts to bank statements so that when the government want to see how much tax and all of that kind of stuff. And generally speaking, I would say we lose money on most videos. Maybe not loads of money, but like most kind of don't quite hit what they have spent on them.
And when you say that, and be as specific or vague as you want to be here, are you talking in terms of YouTube revenue, overall revenue? Because I know
overall, I would say,
because it's stuff for you coming like via a mix of like YouTube and Nebula.
Yeah, so I mean, there's kind of a mixture of a bunch of different stuff, sort of Patreon stuff, YouTube stuff, Nebula stuff, sponsorship stuff, and we do that. And I would say, like, over the past like couple of years, what we've done is, we have one that does gangbusters, and that's like great, and that kind of like stocks us up for a bit, and then quite a lot do like, and I think the thing that I've particularly been found interesting, because YouTube is really good at making you feel as though you have failed at the thing, or that like, even when you have done objectively something that is quite had quite a lot of eyeballs on it, that the actual like the respectable number to do is that every video does 1 million or whatever. And I think the interesting thing is that thing where you're going like, do you know what? Actually, most of the videos getting 500,000 views, pretty much all of them getting, well over 250,000. Like, you're kind of like, that's objectively a lot of people to watch the thing. And yet that doesn't quite work. And I've often felt in this odd space where I'm like, well, there probably are ways to cut down and make stuff that just isn't as good.
Yeah. And is this problem, is it a thing for you where you were getting the revenue that matched up your output more and that shifted, or is this just sort of like the culmination of a thing that's happened for a while?
I think adverts, and I've like a bunch of people have kind of spoken to me since put the video out, and kind of a lot of people have been like sort of ad revenue is not what it has been in the recent past. I know some people who do a lot more kind of sort of capital S sponsorship have sort of said, those numbers are not kind of what they have been, and some of which is, we went through this pandemic where everyone was at home looking for stuff to watch, and YouTube was a great space to sort of
Mhm.
do that. And because advertisers weren't paying for billboards in the street because no one was going to see the things, they were pumping money into YouTube and to TikTok, like all these kind of spaces. And now they're kind of maybe doing that. Also, everyone is feeling like the economy is kind of on a knife edge, and like, is a recession coming? Is beyond all the like horrible things, like, is Trump just going to do something weird that once again sinks the economy into uh just like pushes the economy off a cliff again? um and so there's also probably a hesitancy on the part of advertisers um there as well.
Mhm.
um and then you've kind of got your, yeah, and so I think, yes, there is a difference in terms of worlds, in terms of sorry, a difference in terms of like trends from probably from a couple of years ago. um I think you've also always had to do very well. And I mean, the odd thing is that YouTube is kind of the best of a bad bunch, right? And so I think, I would imagine, if you work for YouTube, well, everyone at YouTube does a lot of like patting themselves on the back for the fact that, you get 55% of uh ad revenue off YouTube, because TikTok like effectively gives people nothing.
Oh
um
yeah, I mean YouTube's by far you are getting the biggest share of revenue relative to the platform, and
TikTok sort of
and yet
pretends to. I've never, but like, if
yeah,
you've ever
and
the
Meta
sort of,
seems pretty bad. I don't make money on Meta platforms,
I
but
think,
they sound bad.
like, Instagram Reels doesn't do anything. I think they just don't.
Yeah,
I think Facebook video, like, there's something. Obviously Facebook video bumping its numbers was a whole thing a bunch of years ago,
yeah,
and sort of crashed a bunch of companies by kind of pretending that people were watching things more than they were. Um, which is another kind of, I don't know, which is also just not a thing that is unique to this particular industry. That kind of like platformization of everything, of kind of that sort of economy of middlemen who kind of find those pinch points in the economy where you can go like, oh cool, I can just sort of have all the money, actually.
mhm,
um Which, I mean, I think is interesting in terms of what does that look like in the medium term, in the long term. Because YouTube has also, as a platform, been relatively resilient in comparison
yeah.
to others.
Well, the
And
the
that,
interesting to see, like, with YouTube these days is there's more and more articles, stories, podcast episodes about YouTube having a bigger market share than Netflix, about YouTube
mhm,
being the most watched thing on televisions in America. On YouTube, there was an article that came out, it might have been New York Magazine yesterday or the day before, about, how they're going to start to reorganize how content is presented so it's more TV friendly and lets,
mhm,
creators present stuff as
mm,
like seasons. So in one sense, all of these external metrics and stories are like YouTube is crushing it. It's the most watched thing. It's dominating Netflix. So it's so weird to see that happening at the same time that a lot of creators on YouTube seem like they are struggling to make it a viable career. Um,
mm.
so it definitely feels a little bit one of those things where like how, and there's maybe the very not dumb, but the very simple way to look at it is like, well, yeah, but there's more stuff on the platform than ever, so it's harder to dominate in the way that it maybe was 10 years ago when there were smaller communities doing things. Um, but it feels weird. I mean, how are you
I think it's
feeling?
also like, what videos is it that, like, YouTube is very much in its like podcast era at the moment,
Mhm,
right? That actually the stuff that you can do reasonably well is you can set up two microphones, and you can, this isn't as much as a pet peeve as it makes it sound, because I know I talked about this in that video, and now I'm
mhm,
talking about it again. But like, actually, this kind of reasonably cheap stuff um probably is possible to cover those costs.
yeah,
Whereas, I guess, if it wants to be able to compete with that stuff that if we want to be able to compete with the like much more high end stuff, that's a lot more of a challenge to do, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of the things that is like obviously like I would rather watch highly and interestingly produced video content on YouTube. I do sometimes watch the people talking with microphone stuff.
Mm.
Um, but it is wild how successful it is. And it's weird because then it almost feels like the platform is now just prioritizing audio content over content that's specifically like video based,
Mm.
which isn't the best. And I feel like it's also, if the platform and the algorithm is going to prioritize longer stuff because of, retention and view time, it's way easier to make an hour and a half, filmed podcast with some edits than it is to make an hour and a half scripted video.
And you can make it
So
look incredible. Like
yeah,
if you've got like a kind of set up the way you can do that, like it's actually,
yeah.
and you can make a really good podcast. Like I think that is, that's worth saying. I enjoy a lot of these shows as well. Like I do think there's a lot of worth to that genre as well.
It's not bad, but it's bad in as much as it's at the expense of some of the
mm,
other stuff.
mm.
So are you, and again, don't say anything you don't want to say. Uh, in response to that, in light of your recent video and stuff you're working on, are there like changes you're planning to make, different stuff you're trying to do? Are you shifting up the model at all, or are you hoping to find ways to keep things going, putting out the same type of content that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, bit of both. I mean, people sort of responded very uh, generously and kind of like joined
Good.
Patreon, which
Yeah.
I don't know, um, which I sort of want. I don't know. Yeah, I sort of came to it from this place of going like, well, let's see whether people want this thing to exist. I guess like you kind of going, well, I guess we could just start going, okay, well, what do we not do? What do we
Mhm.
cut back on? Which, like, yeah, the next kind of few videos, or maybe not, but like, there's a bunch of stuff got coming up where actually we have just gone like, do you know what? Let's do a sort of digital interview like this.
Mhm.
And for in ones where there's like a good reason to do that as well, where it's like actually that probably does also work fine. Whereas the thing we made about pubs, like it was just like feels like those interviews need to be in pubs because it
Yeah.
works for the thing. And so yeah, and so we are sort of also looking at some kind of different things. I'm keen to. So one thing I've been keen to do, and this has been like an idea for a while, and I think sort of the little bit of additional kind of Patreon stuff we've got, I think is going to help us kind of take a bit of a punt on some stuff, which is nice.
Mhm. That's great.
To just go like, "Do you know what, if this works, this will be fantastic. If it doesn't, we were able to take that hit on trying to do the spend some time away from the stuff we know works, I've been really keen to do and I know this sort of sounds like the thing I've just said, but like a kind of well-produced interview series where
Mhm.
we find people that we think do like really interesting stuff or can really speak to a topic, um, and sort of go and find them, kind of do that um proper kind of like sit down interview, but kind of like do wrap around to it so that we've got some we've got some proper intro stuff we can kind of cut away and cut back kind of I
No,
think my
there's ways to do that. I was watching. I'm gonna guess that this isn't a group you're into, Tom, and I'm profiling here. Do you know the rap group, The Clips?
I don't know the rap groups you have correctly profiled.
Okay, great. Well, Clips, it's a rap group that was bigger when I was like in high school and college. They went on hiatus. They're coming back and they have a new album. But there was a video I saw on YouTube last night. It's not on the Spotify channel. Boo! I know we don't like Spotify, but it was like an interview that was set up in a cool location and interspersed with some other like side conversations, some visuals, whatever.
Mm,
And it felt like I was watching an interesting video and not like I was watching a video podcast.
mm,
And,
mm,
I think there's ways to do it that does kind of split the difference and
mm.
feels like, and I know and this one's not fully there, but like Doom Scroll has a little bit of that feeling of doing something
Yeah.
slightly more. I mean, it is like two people in chairs, but there's some little interstitials. But yeah, I mean,
I
I think
like
there's a
I
way
like
to
the
do that.
fact that can't remember what the chap's name is, that Joshua.
Yeah, Josh something. Yeah.
I do quite like the fact that it's not just people that have had a book out in the last month.
Mm-hmm.
Which has been, I listen to a lot of podcasts that a person that's just got a book out and wants to promote the book. I love that, but I was like, oh, that kind of feels like it exists, you know, like I think I'm always someone who's like, I want to make stuff that, I don't know, where it feels like even if it exists, there's not enough of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then what's something else, and also just trying to blend in amongst stuff where we've done kind of quite lengthy, in-depth work. Also look for what are the topics where we can do something that's a little bit more quick turnaround, a bit more kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, actually, how do we respond to this thing within the next month, rather than adding it to the back of the line, which often
Yeah.
the back of the line is often like way into the distance, is like Christmas or whatever. So yeah, a bit of both, because I think that's I think I'm keen to sort of get more stuff out, which has always been a thing that I've been keen on doing. Like
Yeah.
I don't know where you sort of sit on the kind of perfecting the thing to the like get the thing out spectrum. I think this, you've kind of got your sort of South Park over here of like, make the thing in 6 days and
Yeah.
ship it, and it exists in whatever form it exists. Or your kind of Saturday Night Live, and then you have your kind of, I don't know what's that film where he filmed the same actors over like however many years.
Oh, Boyhood.
Boyhood. I don't know why
Yeah.
that's my, no, that's not. No.
Oh.
What's the film where Philip Seymour Hoffman goes into the warehouse and gets obsessed?
Oh, Synecdoche, New
I've now
York.
lost the sound for a completely different reason, which is fun.
Guys, this is why Tom's not going to make it. A lack of professionalism, a total lack of professionalism, and he can't hear the stuff. Okay. But yeah, no, but I think there's an interesting thing where like there are people. Okay, so there's people that exist in this space that can put out 1 or 2 videos a year and make that sustainable. So obviously, like ContraPoints has set up a model and has an established track record and do that. I think the problem is that, like, in general, that's not a doable thing for anyone except the ContraPoints and H-Bomber guys of the world. And I think that where things are moving in general probably does necessitate a higher level of content output. And I think especially, I mean, the thing I think about is like if you don't want to use sponsors, well, then that's a thing right there. B, sponsors are tightening it up. Like I'm going to say a thing I shouldn't say, but there is a particular sponsor that sponsors like every channel in the YouTube video essay space that I know for a fact has just changed a lot of their metrics, which means they're doing less sponsorships and paying less money for them. And that's the problem with an ecosystem that is built on those sponsors, is that like there have been eras where it's been possible to like do a video essay, put out a few a month, make like $10,000-$12,000 just off talking about some product for a bit. I think that era is probably coming to an end in many ways. So it's a balance that I'm trying to think about, is like how can one be sustainable while putting stuff out that's good and not sloppy? And it's also the question of like, what does the audience want? Because I guess I think about it from a perspective of like, if you were to tell me, Michael, would you rather watch 5 really incredibly produced Tom Nicholas videos on YouTube a year, or would you rather watch 20 pieces of content, some of which being shorter things or like more informal things? I'm definitely saying the latter, right? And I imagine that a lot of your audience was there. And I mean, in the chat, I'm curious what you guys think about this sort of thing. And I think that's the thing sometimes I'm trying to think through now, is like, there's what I want and what I would like to do, but what is going to like serve what the audience wants is.
And that's one thing one thing I've often seen, maybe this back in like the days where Twitter was a bit more of a I don't know, hub for stuff.
Yeah.
And it used to kind of serve me up kind of tweets by aspiring creators who were kind of like working on whatever their next thing was.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'd kind of see people who are like, oh, I'm working on my next thing. It's going to be like 1,000,000 hours long. And it's taken me all of this time as like that kind of being the sort of metric for its worth almost. And thinking, well, there's that thing of like, well, if you're just starting out, make a bunch of shit, like just get stuff
Mhm.
out the door. Like actually you're not gonna be, I mean, I'm one thing I quite like about this job is I never quite feel like I've got to this point anyway, but like you're gonna be making mistakes and you're not gonna know what the mistake is till you finish the thing. You're not gonna know how you would have made it differently until you
Yeah.
finished it. So like finish it, get out the door, um and then the next time you do the next thing, do that differently. Um and yeah, and so I think there's always been a case to which I think there's always been an extent to which the model of make one thing every as you say, like every year, and like has been the exception rather than the rule.
Mhm.
um I mean, my sort of heart, I think it's the longest I've ever taken. I think 2 months is probably the longest I've ever taken on a thing. It was made a video about called Griftonomics, about scams, and it took like 2 months and did quite well in the end. People liked it. It was like maybe an hour and 20 minutes. No, an hour and
Yeah,
45,
that
I think maybe.
video ruled. That was one of my
It's got,
favorite
yeah,
videos
thank
of
you.
that year. So it makes sense that it took that long because here, I'm gonna drop a link to that one in the chat. I'm sure everyone knows where your channel is, but
But like probably gave me heart palpitations putting that out because I was like, oh, if this does badly, actually, like spend a huge amount of time and like
yeah,
time is money, right? Like I was like, oh wow, if this does badly, that's like sort of both emotionally and financially very damaging.
yeah.
Um, and so I've tended to try and avoid that for all of those reasons as well. Of just going like I um I don't like having heart palpitations.
They're
And
not
so
fun.
yeah, so I was like, God,
Um,
it's like it's kind of fun to get stuff out there as well. And I don't know, I always have like a million things I want to make stuff about. So um I I'm never like, oh, I wish. I don't know. So if I take too long on something, I'm usually like, oh, this is a shame because I could have made. There's all those other things that I've not managed to make. You know.
yeah, I know that's why I'm kind of not that anyone cares about this, but yeah, I've been like, since starting independently and doing stuff, I've kind of been figuring it out as I go. Yeah, I think my current plan to try to like navigate some of that is like one thing a month that's more of like
Mm,
the big piece of content that I can put some more production effort into, that I can like try to get a sponsor on to justify working on that. And then a couple of things that aren't like shittily made, but that
mm,
are
mm.
shorter and necessitate less heavy production stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and then I do think too is like, with especially where I'm at right now, I'd rather have a mechanism to try some shit out. Like I'm aiming to do like I want like one thing a month, especially on the shorter stuff, to be trying something a little different, a little new, a topic where I'm not
Mm,
sure if it'll play,
mm.
because it feels hard to do that if one is, again, doing one main piece of content every month or whatever, and you want to have a sponsor on it. It's hard to risk. It's hard to
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
step
Yeah.
out there and do something that you're not sure if it will play right, because if it doesn't, it feels quite bad. And like you
Yeah.
said before, and this is I've had, after I got laid off, I had some conversations with, solo YouTube creators kind of being like, well, fuck, like, how do you go about stuff? It's weird because I've done this, but never done it outside of a certain context. And, the thing a lot of people will say is like, it's cool that every now and then something pops off, but it sucks because you can't control that or predict that.
Yeah.
And then you have to have the almost like self control. I mean, again, in the weeds, boring stuff. In the last couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of work on setting up like production budgets and stuff like that, and deciding like what is reasonable. You know what I mean?
Mm,
What can I,
mm.
off the data I have, assume is a reasonable amount of revenue? And there's not a lot of. It's weird in that way. There's not a lot of like business models where the range. I mean, I talked to like a tax person yesterday, and I was just like, yeah, for all I know, like a video could pop off and it could make this much, or it could bomb and it could make that much. And she was like, oh, that's a hell of a range there.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? Oh, I've lost it. Completely
No worries.
lost it.
I know it's late for you. So let me ask this, and we can wind down. I really appreciate you taking time out of your evening.
That's quite all
I
right.
know you got a lot going on, but what's something that you're working on, you're excited about, that you can tease or say a little bit about if you're comfortable with that?
Oh, got a few things going at the moment. Got a few sort of projects in different levels, which is another thing I've been trying to do a bit more of, is actually going like, do you know what? Let's have a few things going, and
That's the move.
you
If you can make that work, that's the
sort of,
move.
I don't know, you sort of be a bit more efficient with things because you're doing less like, sort of less start stop. It's less like running over the finish line with one thing and being like, okay, like whoop. Okay, we've got a really weird project which we decided to just try and make in a few weeks, which is sort of like about Uber and
Okay.
sort of monopoly capitalism, but like quite late in the day. And the part of the way of framing this is, how do we make this interesting? Sort of 15 years after Uber was first a thing. So basically, the town I live just got Uber, and they're currently doing like ridiculously
Wow.
cheap, ridiculously cheap Ubers. Right?
Oh,
You
this is
can
how it
spend
starts.
like £4 to go across town, which is like basically cheaper than the bus. Basically, all buses are £3, so it's like you sort of got this wild system of just buses being Ubers being really cheap. And I was like, okay, I think there's something in doing this video where we go and like we chat to a bunch of taxi drivers and we try and chat to the council about it and kind of do this like, what happens when Uber comes to your reasonably small city with like 160 cars or something, with the same story that you know has happened everywhere else,
Yeah.
and you're kind of like
No, it'll be different this time.
seeing the thing happen in front of you. And then also there's some stuff I want to chat about kind of, there's something really interesting about the ways in which all of these platforms work. Watching it happen in the UK is that there's also this very sort of geopolitical aspect to it, of all of the money disappears to Ireland or to the US,
Mm-hmm,
um, in a country which is used to being one of the countries that all the money disappears to,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and actually finds itself on the flip side suddenly of kind of uneven geographical development, which I think is interesting. I think I need to plant in it a bit more. That's not quite in the video as much as I would like it to be yet, because I think that's kind of that's been something that I've started, but yet we keep doing. There was a thing with the someone from the UK government eventually doing like essentially doing sort of like SponCon for Waymo recently,
Oh
of being
God.
like, we've got Waymo coming to London, and it's just like, yeah, they're because they want to be the only self-driving taxi company, like, and that's maybe a thing that's worth critically engaging with, rather than just being like, wow, it's so shiny. um and so that's kind of fun, because we kind of decided to do it in a bit of a uh make it quick and dirty kind of way. Got nothing about testosterone that I'm working on,
Oh,
sort of like testosterone ads at the moment, so I'm kind of exploring
okay.
that, and which I think is going to be a good video. I
Yeah.
don't know whether it's so weird and in the weeds that everyone's
Are
gonna
you going to get testosterone
cringe.
treatments for it and just jack your T levels up and see how it affects you as you
I
become
will.
an angry
I will.
monster?
I will say I've done a lot of blood tests over the past
Oh, okay. That's fun. That's
few
fun. Well,
months or
now,
so,
but you're just going to give
which
fuel
is a
to
lot of
all the
fun.
weird people that can be like, I always knew he was low T. Um,
Well, you can watch the video and find out.
ooh, ooh, big man. That's amazing. Um, well, and let me say this. I feel you said this in your video, right? That you are expecting. So that's
Yeah,
public.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I just want to say congrats too, man. That's so exciting.
Thank you. It's
This is
exciting.
a very this is a father friendly, parent friendly channel. So got to acknowledge that we got a lot of
It's sort of weird being
dads in the
in
audience. So
the last kind of few weeks are odd because you're like, "It could happen tomorrow."
I found it so weird because in
But,
the
like,
last few
it's the
weeks,
best part of the month, like, and you're just like,
yeah, it's bizarre and it's a weird like calm before the storm thing. Because I remember in the last few
"Mm,
weeks, my wife's feeling pretty fine. She was just like hanging out. I was so used to like her just like being pregnant that it was just sort of like, I
mm."
guess this is just like a thing that exists. And then it happens. And then 48 hours later, everything in your life is completely different. But it's great. Um, and I'm just very excited for you. And, we can say this offline too, but if you ever need dad venting, dad talk, or whatever, always down for that because it is a weird thing. But I do know there's research on this that being a father makes you lower T
Oh,
because
really?
you get soft. I read that this is like supposedly
Ah,
it changes your brain and makes you less of a classic alpha that wants to hunt and kill and fuck everything that moves, and more of
ah."
an empathetic nurturer.
Well, you don't get all, "I need to protect." There was a thing,
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
there was a thing in our antenatal classes where they were like, "Yeah, so in, like, during, like, labor, this thing's gonna happen because, like, back when we were all cave people, the woman would give birth in the cave and the man would be at the front of the cave."
Yeah.
And I was like "Oh, I'd love to sort of fact check that." Like, I feel like it doesn't feel like you've looked this up. It feels like you've kind of you've very much done, like, a sort of evolutionary psychology thing of, like, just going, "Well, I imagine what it was this, and
Yeah.
therefore we will."
The closest I can say experientially is when my daughter was maybe 4 or 5 months old. We were walking in the neighborhood with a pram. She was having a lovely day. She looked very cute. Great day outside. And someone went by on a motorcycle and like revved the engine. And in a second, she went from cherubic, smiling little girl to like crying, screaming, like traumatized. And
Mm.
in that moment, I wanted that motorcyclist to die.
You set
Like I
every
wanted,
motorbike on in the city on fire.
yes, I was just like, if that person dies, they deserve it because they made my little angel feel bad.
Mm,
So there is that. Well, let's catch up again after you go through that wonderful life-changing process. Um, and then I assume everyone who's watching this, if you guys aren't like watching Tom stuff, you're not subscribed, if you're not looking at the Patreon, if you're not Nebula, what are you doing? So definitely support everything Tom's doing because one of the best people doing it, one of the best in the game, in my humble opinion.
oh, it's not true.
So I think it is. I think it is. If I made a list of my top 10 favorite people on YouTube, you would be in that list. It is what it is. I talked
Number
earlier
10.
about how number 10, yes. But I'm reacting against this weird cultural thing now where if you're nice to someone, they call it glazing and get mad at you.
Mm,
I don't believe in that. I think we should be nice to people, and when people do stuff we like, we go from there. But Tom, I'll let you get on with your evening. I know it's like 10 p.m. now for you, so I feel bad that I kept you this long. Thank you so much for hanging
that's
out.
right. The kid's not here yet, so I'm not as tired as,
Well, sleep while you can,
Yeah.
bud.
No,
All right,
thank you very much for having me on. I would love to come back on another time.
let's do it.